I stood before a big metal door. Terrible faces wrought in the bronze. A voice called out from beyond. I believe it was in my own head. And are you ready now? I replied to myself, well, I think I am. The door swung open. I'm in this big round room. On the walls, great mosaics of unspeakably heroic circumstance. I asked myself, what is the meaning of this? I replied to myself, we must imitate the rose. And suddenly, these rose petals start falling from the ceiling, falling into the shapes of beautiful young men and women, in crimson robes and gowns, all dancing together so slow and measured, each gazing rapt into the other's eyes, like for all the world they were all so young and so in love for the first time. And in the midst of it all, a solitary veiled figure, flitting to and fro between the dancers, like it was Eros himself. It was love itself that no man, no human has ever looked in the face, only felt its force through their own eyes. Such a terrible beauty, such an unending pity, unyielding trust, unappeasable desire. This beautiful young petal woman, black lilies in her hair, invited me into the dance. I said neither yes nor no, was simply swept into the midst of it all. And I knew a profundity deeper than the darkness between the stars. And a love could surely breathe fresh life into the winds and the waters and the rocks of this world as we danced on, so slow and measured. Till suddenly I knew. In the horror of my heart, I knew that my soul was being drunken up. Slowly but surely the veil had been lifted from love's eyes, and the darkness of the whole world, this world I've lost and left behind, shrouded me over, slow as the dampers of hell, as I crumpled all trembling to my knees, pleading for mercy, if only on my own poor soul. I turned up in an elevator, hesitated for an unknowable moment, then pushed the button. The bell rang, the door opened. There was a masked man inside with his finger on the controls. He rang. What is it that you seek? I seek the light of knowledge. The masked man hesitated for an unknowable moment, then ushered me into the elevator, pushed the button, the bell rang, the door closed. First floor. Going up. He calls out to somebody above for a lighted candle. Absolute silence. Till the bell rings. The door opens, a single flickering flame in the darkness. Light enough? He asks. No, I reply, I seek more light. The masked man hesitates for an unknowable moment, then pushes the button, the bell rings, the door closes. Second floor, going up. He calls out to somebody above for an overhead light. Absolute silence. Till the bell rings again, the door opens on an empty room. A single lamp lit, dangling from the ceiling, lots of shadow in the corners. Light enough, he asks again. No, I seek even more light. The masked man hesitates for another unnoble moment, pushes the button, bell rings, door closes, going up, 3rd floor. He calls out to somebody above for a spotlight. Absolute silence. Till the bell rings. The door opens, a spotlight floods into the elevator, blinding me to everything but myself. Satisfied? He asks. No, I need to see the light beyond the darkness of my own light. The masked man hesitates for an unknown moment, all in good time. Button pushed, the bell rings, the door closes, going down, basement. The masked man calls out to somebody below who shall remain forever nameless. Knife to the throat, noose around the neck. Absolute silence. Till the bell rings, the door opens, another masked man emerges from the deep shadows, ushers me out of the elevator. I hesitate for an unknown moment, then step out into the gloom. The bell rings, the door closes behind me. The second masked man puts a knife to my throat, threads a noose around my neck, hands me a skull to kiss, then points to a coffin, commands me to take off all my clothes, lie inside the coffin, and pleasure myself as I repeat after him, Dominus Dominum, Domini Domino, Domino, Domino. The dominoes are falling, no skull and bones about it. I was entering into the brotherhood of death. But I'd never felt more alive in my life. I had this disease. I wasn't an old man, but I wasn't a young man. I was a very sick man. I had this disease, this incurable disease. I was told there was no cure for it, not even any medication to ease the pain. I didn't know if I was going to die from one day to the next. I just lay on my bed, gazing up at the ceiling, these patterns of light and shadow on the ceiling, like my whole life was playing itself out on the ceiling. But my world never went black, never went totally black. My world never went totally black. Even when asleep, my dreams would kick in, and there would always be a little bit of sunlight between the cracks, and I never had any nightmares, as if my disease had exhausted all my nightmares. Once a week, the nurse would visit. The visiting nurse, she would visit to plump my pillows, fluff my eiderdown, change my sheets, and empty my bedpan extra large for a weekly fill-up. She would make me as comfortable as it was possible to be. She told me, that's the best anybody can do. And this was the only time I felt ashamed of myself. I felt so terribly ashamed of myself. And one day I told her, I feel so terribly ashamed of myself. She looked at me through these clinically refulgent eyes, tapped me pointedly on the forehead and said, "You're thinking too much. I think you're thinking too much. You have to try not to think too much." Suddenly, I rose up from my bed, my blood boiling over. I grabbed her by the throat and started strangling her. She was so shocked. By the time she realized I was not going to let go, she was already dead. Her body transformed into a limp, lifeless latex dish rack, and her eyeballs popped out of her head. I watched her eyeballs rolling around on the floor. till finally they came to rest next to the unemptied bedpan. And they stared up at me with such unprecedented disbelief. And at this moment, I knew I was not going to die. I was going to live, and I wanted to live. I pulled her body up onto the bed, started undressing her, decided I would be less conspicuous parading round the streets dressed like this than in my pajamas, and I went off to find the nearest police station to confess my crime and accept my punishment. I told the desk sergeant, I must be mad. I'm not sick anymore, but I must be mad. I've just strangled a woman to death for no particular reason. Well, the desk sergeant eyed me up and down like I was some deranged transvestite in desperate need of psychiatric attention. But when the police go to my apartment and they find that limp, lifeless latex dish rag and those eyeballs next to that big pan of feces, they clap me in leg irons, slap the handcuffs on, throw me in jail, and lock away the key. 99 years to life I was sentenced to without possibility of parole. But I never felt healthier in my life. I'd lie on my cot in my cell, gazing up at the patterns of light on the ceiling, like my whole life, shadow playing itself out on the ceiling of my cell. Only now, every now and then, my world went black, totally black. And I began having this recurring nightmare. A one-legged midget in camouflage and bally slipper would leap painfully out of my arsehole and threaten me with a weak old French baguette. I decided to write a book about my experience, even though I knew nobody would ever read it. And nobody ever did. When I finally died, and the guards came into my cell in their rubber gloves to clear my body out, they found this 3,000-ply manuscripted toilet roll tentatively entitled The Lesser of Two Evils. Of course, they tossed it into the trash, along with my toothbrush and spare underwear. But whether it was coincidence, divine providence, random chance, or merely cause and effect, no sooner had my opus gone up in flames, there was a loud explosion, so loud it deafened the world, which went up in smoke, even before my dead eyes vanished off the face of the earth. And in the midst of it all, a solitary veiled figure and I knew a profundity deeper than the darkness between the stars. And in the horror of my unbeating heart, I knew that my spirit was being drunken up as the darkness shrouded me over. And I begged unspeakingly for mercy, if only on my own poor soul. The village was plagued with rats. Rats all over the place. No sooner had one rat been gotten rid of, another rat turned up. The busiest man in the village was the rat catcher. He was also the richest because people would pay anything to get rid of a rat. Nobody ever suspected. He was catching a rat in one part of the village, then setting it loose in another part. So the village was forever plagued by rats. Of course, he didn't live in the village. He lived in a big house on the hill, breeding rats in his basement.